At 75, I realized my family had already planned my life without asking me. I turned 75 on a Tuesday. No party, no candles, just a quiet morning and a cup of tea I had prepared myself. The kettle whistled like it always had, sharp and impatient, and I remember thinking how strange it was that some things still behaved the same, no matter how old you became. I liked that. Routine had become my comfort. I lived alone in the small house my wife and I bought decades ago. It wasn't large or impressive, but it carried the weight of a full life. Every room had learned my habits. The floorboards knew where I stepped most. The walls had absorbed conversations that would never be repeated. After my wife passed, people worried about me living alone. They always do, as if solitude is a disease instead of a choice. But I wasn't lonely. I was settled. There's a difference people forget once they start measuring age instead of ability. I paid my own bills, cooked my own meals, drove myself to the market every Thursday morning. I read, I walked, I kept my mind busy, and I stayed out of other people's way. That last part mattered more than it should have. My children called often at first. "Just checking in, Dad. Making sure you're okay." I appreciated it. I truly did. But over time, the calls began to change. They weren't conversations anymore. They were assessments. How's your memory? Are you sleeping enough? Did you remember your appointment? Each question came with a pause afterward, as if they were listening not to my answer, but to how long it took me to answer. I laughed it off. I had earned a lifetime of patience, or so I thought. It started with small suggestions. Maybe you shouldn't drive at night. Maybe we should help with your finances. Maybe it's time to think about the future. The future, as if I hadn't already lived enough of it to understand what I wanted from the rest. One Sunday afternoon, my daughter came over with a folder. She set it on the table between us, carefully, like it might bite. She said, "I just want you to look at something." Her voice was gentle, practiced. Inside were documents, printouts, highlighted sections, estate planning, medical decisions, living arrangements. None of them had my handwriting on them. "I'm fine," I said. "I don't need all this." She smiled, not unkindly. "Dad, this isn't about need, it's about preparation." Preparation for what? I wondered. Getting older or being moved aside? I didn't sign anything that day. That decision would matter later. But I didn't say no strongly enough either. That would matter more. Weeks passed, then months. My children began speaking to each other more than they spoke to me. They used phrases like, "We've talked," and "We've decided," words that didn't include me, but somehow revolved around my life. I noticed things disappearing from my home. Mail moved from the table, paperwork reorganized, passwords changed for safety. Each change came with reassurance. Each reassurance came with less control. I tried to address it directly once. "I feel like decisions are being made without me." My son sighed. "Dad, don't be paranoid." paranoid. That word landed heavier than it should have, because it wasn't loud, it wasn't cruel, it was dismissive. I began to doubt myself. That's how it happens, not all at once, not dramatically, just a quiet erosion of certainty. The first real fracture came the day I overheard them talking in the kitchen. They thought I was asleep. My name was used casually, strategically. If something happens, we can't wait too long. He wouldn't understand. I sat in my chair, perfectly awake, listening to my life being reduced to a contingency plan. That night, I lay in bed staring at the ceiling. I wasn't angry yet. I was hurt, because I realized something painful. They weren't acting out of malice, they were acting out of convenience, and that, I would later learn, is far more dangerous. The letter arrived 2 weeks later. Official, neutral, polite. An appointment had been scheduled for me. Not with my doctor, with a care coordinator. I hadn't asked for one. I folded the letter neatly and placed it back in the envelope. For the first time in years, I felt something unfamiliar rise in my chest. Not fear, not sadness, something firmer. Awareness. Because when people begin planning your life without your consent, they've already decided something important about you. That your voice no longer matters. And that was the moment, quietly, without drama, that I decided I would not disappear easily.
Part 2. When care becomes control. The care coordinator arrived on a Thursday morning. She was younger than my daughter, polite, efficient, carrying a tablet and a practiced smile that never quite reached her eyes. "Mr. Harris," she said, sitting across from me, "we're just here to talk about support options." Support. That word again. I noticed how often it was used to soften what followed. She asked me questions about my sleep, my appetite, my memory. They were framed gently, but each one felt less like curiosity and more like a checklist. When I answered clearly, she nodded. When I paused to think, she typed. Pauses mattered now, apparently. My daughter sat beside her, occasionally filling in details I hadn't offered. He forgets small things sometimes. He gets tired easily. He doesn't always notice hazards. I wanted to interrupt, but something about the setting made it difficult. When multiple people speak about you, it becomes harder to speak for yourself. The coordinator suggested a temporary arrangement, an evaluation period, just to make sure you're safe, she said. Safe from what? From stairs? From solitude? From being inconvenient? I said I needed time to think. She smiled again. Of course, we'll follow up. After she left, my daughter sighed. You made that harder than it needed to be. That sentence carried a warning. Days passed, and things shifted faster. My doctor's appointments were rescheduled without my input. My prescriptions were adjusted without explanation. My car keys were moved, just in case. Each act alone was small. Together, they formed a pattern. I tried to regain ground. I insisted on going to the grocery store alone. My son drove me instead. He watched me walk the aisles, timed how long I took, noticed what I forgot, and ignored what I remembered. Later he said, "See, this is why we worry." I didn't argue. I was beginning to understand something crucial. Arguing was being documented. One evening I asked for my mail. My daughter hesitated. "I already sorted it," she said. I asked again. She handed me a small stack. Bills, advertisements, nothing official, nothing important, nothing that might allow me to make decisions. That night, I searched my own home quietly, drawer by drawer, cabinet by cabinet. Documents were missing, not destroyed, just relocated to places I couldn't reach. The next morning, I asked directly, "Are you trying to take control of my life?" The room went silent. My son looked away. My daughter spoke carefully. "Dad, that's not fair." Fair, another word that no longer meant what it used to. They told me I was imagining things, that stress was affecting my perception, that I should trust them. Trust, I realized, had become a one-way street. The follow-up letter arrived a week later. An evaluation had been scheduled, again, this time with a physician I didn't know at a facility I hadn't chosen. I was expected to attend. I felt something tighten in my chest, not panic, determination, because suddenly the shape of what was happening became clear. This wasn't about help, it was about efficiency, and I was the obstacle. I called my old neighbor that afternoon. We hadn't spoken in months. He listened quietly, then said, "This doesn't sound right." Those words felt like oxygen. He gave me a name, a lawyer he trusted. I wrote it down carefully, hid the paper in my wallet. Getting to that lawyer wasn't easy. My daughter insisted on driving me everywhere now, so I told her I had a medical appointment. She insisted on coming. I said the doctor requested privacy. That surprised her. At the lawyer's office, I spoke slowly, deliberately. I told him everything, not dramatically, just truthfully. He asked questions no one else had. What have you signed? Who controls your accounts? Has any doctor declared you unfit? When I answered, his expression sharpened. You are still legally autonomous. That sentence changed the room. He explained something important. Control often comes before permission, especially when families assume compliance. He advised immediate steps, documentation, boundaries, independent evaluations, and one more thing, do not sign anything else. When I returned home, the atmosphere had shifted. My daughter was tense. My son was quiet. They could feel resistance, even before they understood it. The next care meeting was different. I attended with my lawyer. The coordinator's smile tightened. My daughter said little. The questions were asked again, but this time the answers were witnessed. When the meeting ended, nothing was decided. That frustrated them, I could tell. That night, I slept deeply for the first time in weeks, because I understood something vital. I wasn't powerless. I had simply been outnumbered. The following days were colder, less warmth, less conversation. Control doesn't like being challenged, but something else emerged. Respect, reluctant, unspoken, real. They began asking again, not deciding, asking. It wasn't over, not even close, but the direction had changed, and for the first time since this began, the future felt open again.
Part 3. When silence is put on trial. The formal notice arrived on a Monday. Not dramatic, not threatening, just official. A capacity assessment had been requested, not recommended, requested. By my own children. The letter stated that concerns had been raised regarding my ability to make informed decisions. It listed examples. None of them were lies. They were fragments, moments taken out of context, a forgotten appointment, a missed call, a pause before answering a question. Small, human things, collected and reframed as evidence. The assessment was scheduled for the following week. A neutral clinic, an independent physician. I appreciated that part. Neutrality mattered now. My lawyer prepared me carefully. Tell the truth, he said. Don't perform, don't resist, just be yourself. I nodded. I had lived with myself long enough. The night before the evaluation, I barely slept. Not because I feared the questions, but because I feared what losing would mean. If I failed, my life would become a series of permissions. The clinic was quiet, too quiet. The doctor greeted me politely and led me to a small room. No family present. That felt intentional. He asked about my daily routine, my finances, my understanding of medical choices. I answered slowly, thoughtfully. He waited. At one point, he asked me to explain why I disagreed with my children's plans. I paused, then said, "Because I still recognize my own life." He wrote that down. The evaluation lasted longer than expected. At the end, he thanked me. No hint, no expression, just professionalism. Days passed. My children avoided eye contact. They were waiting. So was I. The results arrived in a sealed envelope, addressed to my lawyer, not them. That detail mattered. He called me that evening. "You passed," he said. Not casually, firmly. The report stated I was cognitively intact, capable, independent, concerned but rational. When my children read it, something shifted again. This time, they couldn't reframe it. They couldn't reinterpret it. It was final. But surrender doesn't come easily to those who believe control is care. They filed one more request, a legal petition, for guardianship. This time, it went before a judge. The courtroom was small, intimate. No drama, just truth, waiting its turn. My children spoke first. They emphasized concern, responsibility, fear for my safety. They never once mentioned my wishes. Then my lawyer spoke. He presented timelines, contradictions, documents, and finally the evaluation. The judge listened quietly, then turned to me. "Do you feel unsafe living as you are?" he asked. "No," I said. "Do you understand the consequences of your choices?" "Yes." "Do you wish to retain control over your life?" "Yes." He nodded, then said something I will never forget. "Concern does not replace consent." The petition was denied, clearly, decisively. My children looked stunned, not angry, not sad, disoriented, because the narrative they had built collapsed in front of them. Outside the courtroom, my daughter cried. I didn't comfort her, not because I lacked compassion, but because something had changed. I went home alone that day, unlocked my own door, sat in my own chair, and felt the weight lift. Weeks later, life settled, not perfectly, but honestly. My children still visit. Less often, more carefully. They ask now. They wait for answers. Trust isn't fully restored. It may never be, but respect has returned, and that matters more. Because dignity, once defended, reshapes everything.
Part 4. When dignity becomes a legacy. The judge's decision did not end the story. It only changed its direction. In the months that followed, something quiet settled over my life. Not peace exactly, but clarity. I began making small changes, not because I was forced, but because I chose to. A medical alert bracelet, a weekly check-in call, a neighbor with a spare key. Independence did not mean recklessness. It meant informed choice. My children noticed. They didn't say much at first. They watched, waiting for proof that their fear had been justified. It wasn't. Time did what arguments could not. It softened edges. Not all of them, but enough. My son apologized first. Not directly, not completely, but honestly. He said, "I thought I was helping." I said, "I know." That was enough for that moment. My daughter took longer. She struggled with letting go of control. She still does. But now she asks before acting. That change mattered. I stopped trying to explain myself. I let my life speak instead. One afternoon, I was organizing old papers, decades of memories, insurance forms, photographs, letters. I found my will, the one I had written years ago. I reread it slowly, then updated it. Not out of fear, out of intention. I added a letter, not legal, personal, for my children. It said, "I love you, but love does not mean surrendering my voice. If you remember anything about me, remember that I chose my life until the end." I sealed it, not morbid, just complete. As the years passed, my body aged. That part was unavoidable, but my spirit felt steadier, because I no longer lived in quiet defense. I volunteered, mentored, spoke with others my age who felt unheard. Their stories echoed mine, different details, same struggle. One woman said, "I didn't know I was allowed to say no." I told her, "You always were." The final shift came unexpectedly, during a family gathering. My grandson asked me, "Why do you still live alone?" Before my children could answer, I did. "Because I still know who I am," I said, "and because I want you to see that aging doesn't mean disappearing." He nodded, satisfied. Children understand truth better than adults sometimes. That night, my daughter hugged me, not tight, not apologetic, just present. "I see you now," she whispered. I believed her. Aging had not taken my strength, it had revealed it. Not the loud kind, not the kind that demands attention, but the kind that stands firm without raising its voice. I learned something important. Silence is powerful, but only when chosen. Dignity is not given, it is defended. Quietly, consistently, until others learn to respect it.
And if this is the legacy I leave behind, let it be this: growing older does not make you smaller, it makes your truth clearer.